Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva. Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol. Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol. गौर प्रेमानंदे हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। हरे कृष्ण।
Five-minute Prabhu. राधे जय जय माधव दाई राधे जय जय माधव दाई गोकुल तरुणी मंडल माहिते राधे जय जय माधव दाई 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 दामोदर रति वर्धन वेसे दर रति वर्धन वेसे हरि निस्कुट वृंदा विपिने से हरि विस्कुट वृंद राधे जय जय माधव दाई राधे जय जय माधव दाई गोकुल तरुणी मंडल माहिते गोकुल तरुणी मंडल माहिते राधे जय जय माधव दाई राधे जय जय माधव दाई वृषभानु दधि नव शशि लेखे वृषभानु दधि नव शशि लेखे ललिता सखी गुण रमित विशाखे ललिता सखी गुण रमित विशाखे राधे जय जय माधव दायते 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 गोकुल तरुणी मंडल माहिते गोकुल तरुणी राधे जय जय माधव दायते करुणां करुमयि करुणा भरिते करुणा करुमयि करुणा भरिते सनक सनातन वर्णित चरिते सनक सनातन वर्णित चरिते राधे जय जय माधव दायते राधे जय जय माधव दायते कुल तरुणी मंडल माहिते ओ मंडल माहिते गोकुल तरुणी मंडल माहिते राधे जय जय माधव दायते 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 Somebody can like that. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare
things up and then we can start. So, are you on WhatsApp?
So this is fine. You just need the browser link of class and then just project it right.
So, what do I do with the browser
So
link?
basically, yeah, just open it on Chrome, that particular link, and we'll write on a project. Okay. Yeah.
It's strange. Then, so how does this link? It's virtual.
Basically, it runs on the
Cast
same
tab,
Wi-Fi.
living
Yeah,
room
that's
TV.
it.
Okay.
You just start casting it.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, it's super easy.
Can I make this?
This good now, you can do also slideshow and you can just show it. Should I move the table slightly closer to it?
Where is this? It's not updated in the sense that
It's not the version.
see, this is here, this is slide is here. Why is this not coming here? Let's try refresh it. Do I need to sign in? Will that make a difference?
Generally, yeah, I mean, you should sign this. This should be your account, office account. Oh, here? Yeah. Here? Yeah. Yeah, if you just sign in, then it should be good. Yeah. Yeah, slideshow.
No, the thing is,
It's not the updated one. Generally, if you save in your desktop, if you want save in your
it is same, and that's where I got the link from.
I'm not sure why. If you just try
Let's
saving.
try one thing. Let's do one thing. Let's close this. Let's remove this. Then try one second. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We'll just do this one and then join the Zoom.
You had Zoom ID?
Yeah.
No, it's not good.
Maybe.
Should you try an edge?
It wouldn't make a difference. I think that PPT slightly out of
What do you mean?
I mean, like here it's not showing the updated version.
Why would that happen?
Maybe what we can do for now, you can join Zoom and we can just look it up on phone and then Chaitanya Prabhu comes, we can just connect it for HTML and that might be one.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Go open the web. So it is saying the same browser.
Oh,
so it is saying the same.
Open in browser, yeah.
Browser will open.
Any browser is fine. Edge will also work.
This is a problem too. Okay. But it doesn't make any difference. Okay, we'll start anyway. You can always adjust afterwards.
Just join the Zoom and I think we should have it.
Like it is?
Yeah, sure. I just unmute from here, right? Unmute? No, just share screen. Yeah, you can just share screen.
It's only for the PowerPoint. Well, you have to give me permission to share the screen. I'd like to record also if possible.
You can just look at the screen, the Zoom screen. Chromecast is not working. वो Chromecast में outdated version आ रहा है अच्छे से हाँ when it comes to connect to HDMI.
Are you expecting many more participants? Or otherwise, it's almost like we are on opposite ends of the island. I'll come closer. I can also come. So Chromecast works only for the browser, everything in the browser, only a PowerPoint in the browser.
Anything in the browser.
Okay. And why is it not being seen right now?
Yeah, you just have to go to this settings option and just cast it here. Just cast it.
So what are the closest cast?
Just cast screen. Yeah, or that will cast your whole thing.
Oh, if it casts the whole screen, then I can show this PowerPoint from here also.
I'm not sure. Generally, it works in the browser. I haven't seen it working.
Okay, cast.
Just selecting the first option. Just use this. Yeah.
It's casting screen now. Now if I change this.
Oh, yeah, it works. Yeah. Oh, it works actually. Oh, I didn't know there's an option there.
That's good. Thank you. Okay, why is the color is slightly changed, but it's okay. You can read, no? Okay, good. Thank you. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। The echo coming somewhere? Maybe you can mute that. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. It's muted.
It's coming from the laptop.
No, but my input as well as output are muted. So what do we do with the TV? Okay, that's a loud noise. Okay.
Make the volume 0.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Oh. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Hare. Okay. Stopped, I think, now. No, not yet. Unjoin the audio from the Zoom. How? Leave computer audio. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Okay, done. Thank you. So, thank you very much for coming today. And I will discuss today on the topic of how to be detached without becoming irresponsible. And during the pandemic, I was of course giving classes and doing other things, but I was also exploring a lot about people's conceptions of spirituality, and especially about the Bhagavad Gita, not just spirituality in general, not just Krishna consciousness in general. So on online forums like Quora or even on Reddit, India to some extent is becoming more and more uh, nationally assertive. Indians under the current, because of the current government, or at least under the current government, it can be causal or it can be correlation. But so there are a lot of people who want to take pride in their national heritage. Indians in India and Indians abroad also. So I have been exploring what all are the obstacles that people face. So what are the misconceptions that people have? And one of the challenging conceptions that is there with respect to the Gita. See, there is a way to offer nominal tribute to the Gita, which any person with a little bit nationalistic or Hindu sentiment will say, the Bhagavad Gita has solutions to all problems in the world. But I have too many problems to read the Bhagavad Gita right now. So it is just like a nominal tribute. As soon as you say all problems are solved, that means it's we are not taking it very seriously. So what are the obstacles people have? So one of them is they feel this idea of detachment, which is talked about in the Gita, is quite impractical. And there's see every idea or every conception, it could be a misconception, it could be a preconception, or just a conception. Conception is an idea, preconception is that idea we bring into when we read a book, and misconception is it's a clearly wrong idea. So whatever it is, the idea that we have, it has a history associated with it. It has a past, and it also has a future, in the sense that we think, okay, if this is how things are, then this is what will happen in the future. So there are some people who have associated the idea of detachment also with India's failure to progress materially. So because we Indians focus a lot on detachment, that's why the West progressed so much, but India did not progress so much. But it's ironic, if that were really true, then India stopped progressing materially when the West came to India. So, isn't it? Why did the West come to India? It's not that the whole world is competing to invade and possess some country like Somalia. It doesn't have much wealth. So India, it was very prosperous when the Europeans started colonizing the world, and then they decided to concentrate their sights on India because it was just so prosperous. And in one sense, India lost its prosperity not so much under the Mughal rule or the Islamic rule in general. Mughals were just one dynasty, others also who ruled India. But India lost its prosperity under the colonial rule of primarily the British. So to say that it is because of India's ethos of detachment that we were not materially prosperous and progressive, well, then why were we progressive for centuries before modernization? So what happened is, it is true that if we compare the world now, India is not as well progressed, or even if we have mixed feelings about the definition of progress that exists in today's world, but still in terms of basic material facilities for living, basic material So utilities for living. There are many people who don't have those in India. So in some ways, some parts of India are at least like third world, some parts are almost like the first world. So this idea of detachment, it has a particular connotation in the Western mind. And India started examining its own tradition from that perspective. And that is where the problem came up. What do I mean by that? In the Bhagavad Gita, detachment has a very different meaning from what detachment means for many people. So, for most people in today's world, detachment means either indifference or irresponsibility. Indifference means I don't care at all. It's like being cold hearted. And irresponsibility means I don't do anything. No matter how I feel, I just am not invested enough to do anything. So, detachment is often seen in terms of either not having invested one's emotions or not having invested one's actions. But that is not exactly the way the Bhagavad Gita understands detachment. In fact, we could say the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is engagement in detachment. That means there is engagement. Engagement of emotions is there, engagement of actions is also there, but it is with a detached disposition. So let's try to understand this. We'll begin with a verse. Krishna talks here about detachment or tyaga, renunciation in the mode of goodness. So I'll explain the verse and then we'll recite it a few times. Krishna says, Karyam iti eva yat karma. So Karya is duty. This is what I need to do. This is my duty, I need to do it. Niyatam kriyate Arjuna. So one who does, this is my obligated duty, this is what I'm expected to do. Therefore I'll do it because it is ordained to me. Kriyate Arjuna. And what is the detachment aspect here? Sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva. One gives up attachment to the fruits of the work. Satyagaha satviko mataha. Such detachment, such is the detachment in the mode of goodness. So Krishna is not talking in terms of, say, not having emotions invested. He's not saying that not even, he's definitely not talking about not doing the actions that we're supposed to do. He's talking about detachment primarily in terms of the results of the action. So this is very significant. And this is, if you understand this concept, what the Gita means when it's talking about detachment, it can actually redefine our own conception of spirituality also. So let's recite this verse. Karyamityeva yat karma niyatam kriyate arjuna sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva satyagah satviko mataha कार्यमित्येव यत्कर्म नियतं क्रियते अर्जुन संगं त्यक्त्वा फलं चैव सत्यागः सात्विको मतः कार्यमित्येव यत्कर्म नियतं क्रियते अर्जुन संगं त्यक्त्वा फलं चैव सत्यागः सात्विको मतः. Would anyone like to recite? कार्यमित्येव यत्कर्म नियतं क्रियते अर्जुन
संगम त्यक्त्वा फलं चैव
फलं चैव
सत्यागः सात्विको मतः.
सत्यागः सात्विको मतः. So, thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, yes, Mataji. Yeah. कार्यमित्येव यत्कर्म karma
Niyatam kriyate Arjuna.
niyatam kriyate Arjuna
Sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva.
sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva
Satyagah satviko mataha.
satyaga satviko mataha. Yes, later.
कार्यम इत्येव यत्कर्म
Yamityeva yat karma
नियतं क्रियते अर्जुन
niyatam kriyate Arjuna
संगं त्यक्त्वा फलं चैव
sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva
सत्यागः सात्विको मतः
satyaga satviko mataha. Yes. Karyamityeva yat karma
नियतं क्रियते अर्जुन
niyatam kriyate Arjuna
सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा फलं चैव
sangam tyaktva phalam chaiva
सत्यागः सात्विको मतः
satyaga satviko mataha. Thank you. So here actually Krishna in this verse and the previous two verses analyzes detachment in the three modes. So this chapter in one sense, let's see. Okay. So this chapter in one sense analyzes the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita in summary. So it begins with Arjuna rephrasing the question that began the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita began with Arjuna confused about whether he should fight or he should not fight. His idea was that if I fight, I'll get entangled. But if I don't fight, I'll be irresponsible. So doing my duty is going to entangle me. Not doing my duty is failing in my responsibility. So what should I do? So Krishna is asked the same question at the end of the Gita because it's a dicey question and Arjuna wants to get a clear understanding. And sometimes what happens is, if we are teaching something to someone and that person keeps asking the same question again and again, we might get irritated. I already answered this question, isn't it? But Krishna doesn't get irritated. Krishna answers the same question from different perspectives and he goes to deeper levels of analysis. So it's not, Krishna understands that Arjuna is not simply trying to annoy Krishna, or it is not that sometimes what happens is we ask the same question hoping that this time I'll get a different answer. because the previous answers we did not like it. Or sometimes we may ask the same question to different people so that one of them will give us the answer that we want. So, but Arjuna is not doing like that over here. Because it's a difficult concept. So Arjuna wants to understand. And that's he's asking in different perspectives. He's asking the same question at different times. And Krishna answers by going deeper and deeper into the analysis. So here his question is, Sannyasasya mahabaho tattvamichhami veditum tyagasya cha rishikesha prithakkeshi nisudana. So he's saying tattvamichhami. I want to know the truth of what is these two things are. Sannyasa broadly refers to the ashram of sannyas. That is a renounced order. And tyaga refers more to the disposition of renunciation. So he says, okay, the renounced order and renunciation. What is the difference between the two? That is his question. Because in a sense, he has also gathered to some extent that Krishna's teaching is to Arjuna, you don't have to renounce the world, but you do have to adopt the mood of renunciation. So fight with detachment. That was what he understood. But what is the difference between the two? And to answer this, Krishna now integrates the concept which he has recently elaborated on. That concept is the concept of the three modes of material nature. Now the gunas are something which Krishna has mentioned repeatedly before also, but that is just a mention, a cursory mention. In the 14th chapter, he elaborately analyzes the modes. And after analyzing the modes, then he starts using that framework for explaining other things. So first of all, what are the modes? We could say that, let's see if we can find this slide. Yeah. two ways the Gita refers to the modes. So one is that the modes are like the building blocks of reality. So for example, right now on the screen, you are seeing various images. So these basically it is just RGB, three colors are there, and from that various images come on a monitor or on a TV screen or on a movie celluloid screen, whatever. The three basic colors they combine together to create all that we see over there. So in one sense, the modes are like colors. Hmm? That's one way of looking at the modes. They are the building blocks of material reality. But modes are not just that. Modes are also, if if I'm a conscious being, I have consciousness over here. So this is the material object, or this is the material world in general. So modes are like ropes that shape the interaction between matter and consciousness. They are subtle forces. So depending on the mode we are in, we will look at things from different perspectives. So for example, if a person is tamoguna and they see a delicious cake, first thing they will think, okay, how can I take this cake and go into some secret corner and eat all of it? Hmm? So it's not just me first, it's only me. In tamoguna, one doesn't think of anything else. And it's not that that person is being deliberately selfish, because that is the way their thought process is functioning. That's the first thought that will come in them. Rajoguna is, okay, everybody can have the cake, but I want the cherry, I want the icing, I want the best part. How can I get that? Sattva would be, yeah, okay, we have 25 people, we'll divide this into 25, let's all of us share. If we go into Shuddha Sattva, somebody will say, I want others to have the cake, even if I don't get it. So this is just different ways in which we could say the modes are the default way we look at the material world. Now, it is not that we have to function in that way. We might also get the urge, I want to eat all of the cake. But we say, no, that's not the way I want to be. So the modes, they don't force us, they push us. And to the extent we are aware, we can counter push. But they will push us in particular directions. Or we can say more, it's pull us. They can pull us and we can counter pull. No, I don't want to go in that direction. But the modes, they shape how we look at reality, how we perceive it, how we process it, and then what we pursue within it. Okay, this is what I want to do. So Krishna uses this frame of analysis of the modes to then look at various aspects in the world. So what are the three modes? Goodness, passion, and ignorance. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So these three modes, now what they do is, they all have their typical effect on the human psyche. So you can say, some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people wonder what happened. So those who are in goodness, they make things, okay, I'll do this, you do this, we all will work together and we'll make this happen. They make things happen. So in goodness, a person understands what is my capacity, what is beyond my capacity. We all need to work together. But some people watch things happen. They think, I will do everything, but I try to pull this, say, I think I'll carry this whole weight. And I try to carry the weight, and then it falls on me, or it falls on someone else, it falls somewhere else, it breaks something. Hey, what happened? Everything went wrong. So some people watch things happen. There are some people who wonder what happened. It's like they're so lost. There might be an earthquake in the room where they're living, and they sleep through the earthquake. And then they wake up and say, what happened to my bed? So they just are oblivious. But these are the way three modes basically function. Now Krishna uses the analysis of the three modes to talk about how renunciation can also be in the three modes. So the verse which we talked about just now, Sangam Tyaktva Phalam Chaiva. So Sangha can mean attachment, it can also mean association. So Krishna says, That renunciation in the mode of goodness is what? Not that one gives up one's duties, not even that one gives up one's concerns. Okay, this is important for me. So it is, if the parents cannot be detached from the children, whatever happens to the child, it's okay. It's your duty. You have to take care, and taking care means also being concerned. But give up worldly association and give up worldly attachment. We'll explain what that means. But that is the defining characteristic of renunciation in the mode of goodness. Then he says in the mode of passion, what happens is dukkhamityeva yat karma kaya klesha bhayat tyajit sakrutva rajasam tyagam satyagah rajaso matah. So dukkhamityeva yat karma, oh, this work is so troublesome, and kaya klesha bhayat tyajit. If I have to do this work, it will cause me so much trouble to my body and mind, and therefore I don't want to do it. And he says, if you do like this, he said, naiva tyaga phalam labhet. The renunciation will not be fruitful. It will not be constructive. And then he says, one just doesn't understand what is renunciation in the mode of ignorance. He says, moha tasya parityaga tamasah parikirtitaha. That one just doesn't understand what is to be done, what is not to be done. I just don't feel like doing it, so give it up. So, in the mode of ignorance, sometimes a person feels self-righteous about being irresponsible. I remember one of my early experiences, and there was this devotee who was known to be very irresponsible, and he had gone for book distribution, and he came back. So at that time, he told the Sankirtan leader that, oh, the Lakshmi which we had collected from book, I lost that. He said, how did he lose it? He says, no. Bhagavad Gita says, stay equipoised. So he said, just don't get disturbed. Follow the Bhagavad Gita. So now, this is, follow the Bhagavad Gita means that when we lose or gain for our own purposes, we don't get agitated by that. But if you're doing service for Krishna, that doesn't mean or we're doing service for any responsible cause, being uncaring, justifying one's own responsibility and calling that equanimity. No, that is just rationalization. You know this word rationalize? Rationalize means that RATIONALLIES. Rational lies. So we tell lies in order to justify whatever wrong thing we have done. So rationalize. So it can be rationalized two ways. But so when we talk about rationalizations, so rationalizations means basically we are using our intelligence to try to justify some wrong thing which we have done. So it's rationalize. So it is actually same as rational lies. So, so I tell rational lies when we rationalize. So this is like that. Using philosophy to justify one's own irresponsibility. Say, for example, if a doctor makes a mistake during a surgery and the patient becomes very complicated, things become terribly wrong, and the patient is disturbed, the patient's family is disturbed, the doctor says, सब कुछ भगवान के हाथ में. Well, ultimately it is true, but if that was the ultimate truth, we didn't have to put anything in your hands, isn't it? If everything was in God's hands, then why did we even come to you as a doctor? Isn't it? Yeah, okay, everything is ultimately in God's hands, but what was in your hand? Did you make a mess of it? Could you have done something better? You have to take responsibility for that. So, moha tasya parityagas. So when one when just gives up out of irresponsibility, out of illusion, and then justifies it, that is renunciation in the mode of ignorance. And this is something which Krishna strongly reproaches. Let's try to look at it from another perspective. Because sometimes what happens is the modes may seem a little complex because there are three different modes, but you could just look at different terms to understand the same point. So we can have renunciation, we can have frustration, and we can have aversion. So in renunciation, what happens is renunciation is in Sattva Guna. And what it means is there is absence of emotional dependence on externals. Okay, if this external doesn't work out, no, it's not going to be the end of the world for me. It's not that I'm going to collapse completely. Hmm. For some people, if they set a particular goal and if they don't win it, they don't achieve that goal, they don't meet the target, then they just degenerate completely. They just deteriorate and they become mentally sick and they collapse. So that kind of the capacity to avoid that. Okay, I tried it, it didn't work, let's move on. So renunciation is absence of emotional dependence on externals. Now specifically I'm talking about emotional dependence. There are some things for which we are physically dependent. Now, we need air to breathe. We need food to eat. So detachment doesn't mean I don't care for air or food. But it's, let's say, suppose we have to fast sometimes. Now, it's not that for a few hours or even a day of fasting we are going to die because of that. So physically we do need food sooner or later. But emotional dependence means even for a little time when things don't work out, we become agitated. So renunciation is absence of emotional dependence on externals. Whereas frustration is, there is no, the emotions are very strongly involved over there. But the emotions are annoyance or anger. Oh, why didn't this work out? I didn't get this. And then one feels very upset about it. So that is frustration. Now we can easily recognize when somebody is frustrated. Say if a team starts losing a match, and then the fielding team is losing the match, then the bowler may become sullen, or the captain may start screaming at everyone else, and we can see that they are getting frustrated over there. So that's frustration. So, and frustration in one sense is in the mode of passion, because one is trying to do something, is not working out, and one is overreacting in some ways. But aversion means aversion is where the negative emotion has solidified. It's, we can say that anger is hot-headed, hatred is cold-blooded. When I'm angry with someone, I may just speak something harsh and then it's over. But if I hate someone, then I'll systematically, almost clinically plan, when can I speak something in a way that will hurt this person the most. So it's cold-blooded. So aversion is much more darker. So aversion is where that's hatred toward externals because of failure to get. So suppose a particular relationship doesn't work out. Now I'll bring that point now. So this is the difference between renunciation and the three modes. Now we may say, why is detachment important? So most people may feel, I really don't need to be detached. I need many things. I need to be responsible. I need to be smart. I need to be cool. But if we asked a cross section of people today, what are the top 5 traits you would like to develop? How many people will say, I want to be more detached? Very unlikely. So although most of us may not feel the value of being detached, but the result of not being detached, if we look at it, then we can value detachment. We'll see that these two things, kankshati and shochati, craving and lamenting, these do consume a lot of our emotional energy and even our physical energy. So kankshati means that we are craving for something, but if it doesn't work out, then we need to accept it. Okay, this didn't work out. What can we do? Okay, I have to accept it. So somebody may study for IAS. Now, if in India, if somebody is studying for IAS, usually they have to study for, even if they are brilliant, they have to spend 2-3 years at least. Sometimes 4, 5, 6 years. And there's no guarantee that they will get anything. It's this success percentage is like 0.1% of all the students who apply, they get through. So there is a large percentage of things not working out. So one has to accept it and move on. They may have a lot of desire, I want this, but it may not work out. So, and this is something which will happen to all of us in some areas of life. We try a lot for some things and we may not get them. So if we don't have detachment, then that craving will consume us so much it will not allow us to live peacefully. And sometimes It's one thing, I wanted something and I don't get it. So that's associated with craving. And lamenting is usually associated with I had something and I lost it. So it may be, now we may have a close friend who just moves away to some other place, and then their life becomes different. So they don't even stay in touch with us. We lose that friendship. Or sometimes a loved one, a family member may depart from the world. Some parent or grandparent whom we are very close to. So sometimes the physical things which we are very close to, we may lose them. So at that time there is lamentation. And while it's a natural part of life, when we lose some things, we will feel some pain. But eventually, we need to be able to move on. Okay, this happened, and now let me move on with my life. So that shochati, that lamenting, we will be able to minimize it if we can be detached. Now, in today's world, again, people may not talk about being detached so much. The word detachment may not come in, but when the relationships break up, say when somebody has a breakup, then people say, how do you move on? So what does moving on mean at that time? They're talking about to some extent detachment. So now obviously we don't want only detachment. We want the capacity to form relationships. We want the capacity to move forward in our life. But detachment is also a greatly valuable virtue. So if we're working at a job and somehow because of circumstances beyond our control, say the industry changes and then we lose that job. Now naturally we'll feel bad. We spend time, energy, thought, emotion, all of it in it. But then okay, now I have to look somewhere else. I have to move on. So that capacity to accept and the capacity to move on. These capacities are present in us to the extent we have detachment. And when we don't have detachment, then these capacities become deficient. And then kankshati and shochati becomes huge. So in that sense, detachment is a valuable virtue for us also. So what detachment in relationships means? It does not necessarily mean not caring for others. We are social creatures. We cannot live without caring for others. But detachment, if we lack detachment, then we need to constantly prove ourselves to others. That I will show this person. Now what happens is we all may have grown up in a particular way where we're compared to a sibling or compared to a neighboring kid or compared to someone else. And then we may throughout our life be craving for the approval of someone, maybe as a parent or a parent figure or some other authority figure. And the life is such that some people may never approve us. There's a greater possibility that there will be a flood in the Sahara, then that person will appreciate us. It just sometimes some people are wired in such a way that person, we may do 100 right things, and that person will find the 101st thing which we did not do, and they will criticize us for that. So then what do we do? Yes, I have no need to prove myself to this person. My life can move on without needing the approval of this person. So that is detachment. Detachment is not being indifferent and not caring for others. That was not the way. If we want to look at the Bhagavad Gita itself, the way Arjuna functioned in the Bhagavad Gita. If we consider, Krishna told Arjuna to be detached. In fact, in the 13th chapter, when Krishna talks about the characteristics of knowledge, one of the characteristics he says is Putradara Graha Adeshu Aratir Anabhishwanga Putradara Graha Adeshu. So he says being detached from one's children, one's spouse, one's family. It's interesting that the first word that Krishna uses over here is Putra. That is children or child or son. And exactly after the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, in the Mahabharata war, several of Arjuna's sons are killed. First is son Iravan through Ulupi is killed. He's killed by a ambush. And then at least Iravan was, Ulupi and Arjuna never lived together. They married and Ulupi was taking care of Iravan. So Arjuna was not that close to Iravan. But then the second was on 13th day. Who was killed? Abhimanyu. And not only was Arjun very close to Abhimanyu, but it's also uh, it's the three things with respect to Abhimanyu's death hurt Arjun a lot. First was that Irvan was at least killed in a fair fight. Alambush was a demon commander on the Kaurava side, and he and Irvan fought. They had a fierce fight, but eventually Alambush overpowered Irvan. He felt bad, but still it was a fair fight and he was killed. But with respect to Abhimanyu, the first thing was he was killed in a unfair fight. 6 warriors, as we know, after Abhimanyu was trapped in the Chakravyuh, 6 warriors came together and they ganged up on him. Abhimanyu fought valiantly, but it was a lost cause. So first was the killing was unfair. Second was that in one sense Arjuna felt that that killing was unnecessary. Because he felt if only I had been there, I could have broken the Chakravyuh, I could have come back out of it. So he said that my son had to do something because I was not there to do it. So in that sense, he said, if I had been there, I could have saved my son. So there's this personal sense of guilt that not only did I fail my son, but that rather my son had to do something because I was not there to do it. And the third part was that he felt that, okay, even if he had not been there at that time to help, he could have come later. So what happened was the way situations worked, the Kauravas were very cunning. The Kauravas planned things in such a way that first Arjuna was diverted by a Trigarta king Susharman. And he challenged him. Kshatriyas generally, if they are challenged, they cannot refuse a challenge. However, none of these rules are like cast in iron for a permanent degree. Say, for example, Yudhishthir. He was challenged to gambling and he said that he had to accept the challenge. But even Yudhishthir himself admits later that I didn't have to gamble so much. I had to play the gambling because I was challenged. But he didn't have to gamble his whole kingdom. He didn't have to gamble his own family. He didn't have to do that. So that went to extreme. So what happened was this attempt to sidetrack Arjuna was started from the 11th day itself. On the 10th day, Bhishma fell and then Drona became the commander. And Drona actually expected that Duryodhan will make Karna the commander. And he thought, I'll have to serve under Karna, who's like a student for me. But then suddenly when Duryodhana invited Drona to become the commander, he felt very honored. He said, I'm gratified. What can I do for you? He says that, have Yudhishthir arrested alive. So Drona's eyes opened wide. He says, Yudhishthir is such a Ajata Shatru. He has no enemies to such a degree that even you don't want to kill him. So Duryodhana just nodded derisively. And he said, after the fall of Bhishma, I have understood that we will not be able to defeat the Pandavas. But my plan is that if you can arrest Yudhishthira alive, I will challenge him to another gambling match. And we will send him to the forest for another 13 years. So Drona just shook his head regretfully. And he said, I can try, but Arjuna I can defeat everyone on the Kaurava side, on the Pandava side. But I'm not sure about Arjuna. Although he is my student, he has acquired celestial weapons and he is much younger than me. So Duryodhana said, don't worry, we will divert him elsewhere. So from the 11th day onward, Susharman along with his army was challenging Arjuna. And on the 11th and 12th days, the Kaurava strategy almost worked. Arjuna was being diverted over here and Drona charged to arrest Yudhishthir. And both days he came very close. But in the nick of time, Arjuna got some sense. Maybe something is wrong over here. I need to go. So he just showered a countless flurry of arrows on the Trigartas and stunned them. And then he charged to the rescue of Yudhishthir. So that strategy was not unknown. So on 11th and 12th day, Arjuna, although he was diverted, he came back in time. But on the 13th day, he got so consumed in fighting with the Trigartas that he didn't even think of going anywhere else. And that's why he was beating himself up more. He felt that I could have saved Abhimanyu and I could not. So he went through a whole panorama of emotions. First there was shock, there was devastation. Oh, my son is killed. Then there was cold fury. First there was anger where he lashed out at his brothers. He said, couldn't you protect my son? He had gone to protect you. He had gone to protect our army. Couldn't you protect him? And finally, he went through the emotion where he said, fury. He said, I will. When the Pandavas explained that their plan was that he will break the Chakravyuh and we will all go inside following him. And this plan would have worked well, but Jayadratha intervened. And he blocked everyone else from going inside. So then, although Jayadratha had not shot the arrow which killed Abhimanyu, Arjuna held Jayadratha responsible. Because the Pandavas had a plan. And that plan would not only have saved Abhimanyu, but would have actually devastated the Chakravyuh from inside. But that plan was thwarted opportunistically by Jayadratha. And that's why they decided, I'll bring down Jayadratha. Now, through all this, Krishna did not tell Arjuna, hey Arjuna, you forgot the Bhagavad Gita. I told don't be detached to your family, don't be attached to your son and wife and other things. He doesn't say that at all over there. Why? Because at that point, an emotion of grief, of anger, of shock, all those are natural. And Krishna acknowledges those emotions. But Krishna helps Arjuna to move on. Okay, now Abhimanyu, you cannot bring back somebody who is dead. But the cause for which he died, that cause needn't be thwarted. That cause can still be carried forward. That cause can still be fulfilled. So Krishna, so Shochati in terms of grief, there was certainly certain amount of grief. But Krishna helped Arjuna to move forward. So that brings the point. Detachment does not mean being cold-hearted. What is this? Yeah. To be detached is not to be cold-hearted. That detached means that, as I said, our emotions are not locked into something that if this doesn't work out, I'm going to collapse. But cold-hearted means to have no emotions at all. Or to not even have any capacity for emotions. We could use, instead of cold-hearted, we could use the word stone-hearted. The stone has no emotions. So detached person is not like that. When somebody is detached, what happens is they have the capacity for experiencing emotions. And they do invest their emotions in things. But when it is time, they can disinvest their emotions. Okay, this is what I did my part. Now I have to move on. So that this capacity of investing emotions and capacity of disinvesting emotions, both is there when one is detached. And that is what Krishna is recommending over here in terms of detachment. It is not being irresponsible, it is not being uncaring. I talk about two things. One is indifferent, it means cold-hearted, and the other is irresponsible, not caring for things. That is also not what Krishna teaches in the Gita. So if you look back at this verse, what I said is Sangam Tyaktva Phalam Chaiva. Satyaga Satviko Mata. That one is detached from the results of the work. I'll conclude with 2 points now. You can have a few questions. It's important when you use the word results or fruits. Phala, Krishna uses the word phala. So phala can mean two different things. It can refer to results, it can refer to goals. The two are not exactly the same. So when you talk about results are what we get after we do the activity. Whereas goals are what we envision to motivate ourselves for doing that activity. So if we consider from a more specific differentiation perspective, goals and results are not the same thing. Krishna is telling, be detached from results, not from goals. When Arjuna set a goal, that okay, tomorrow, 14th day, before sunset, I am going to bring down Jayadratha. Krishna did not tell Arjuna, hey, Arjuna, you forgot karmanya vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. No, I didn't say that. Why? Because they're two different things. We all have to do our part in whatever we do. Hmm. And to do our part well, we need some inspiration, we need some motivation. You see, even Srila Prabhupada, when he started from India to America, he had a vision. He said, there are temples all over the world, there are devotees in those temples. Only time is separating us. He had that vision. I did not consider having that vision as contrary to the teachings of the Gita. But for many years, Prabhupada had been trying and nothing was working. In India, he was trying. For the first year, he tried in America also. First in Butler, Pennsylvania, then in uptown New York, in main part of New York. Then the first time he went to Lower East Side also. With David, things didn't work out. Prabhupada was, in that sense, the results didn't come out, Prabhupada still kept moving forward. But that didn't stop him from setting goals. So goal setting is considered to be a vital activity in today whenever people have projects. And is the Gita against goal setting? No, that's an oversimplified understanding what the Gita is saying. The idea is that yes, if we want to do our part, whatever is required for us to do our part well, we need to do it well. Now we may say, but how is it if I set a goal, then naturally I want the result, isn't it? How can I separate the two things? Well, yeah, it's not easy, but it's not as difficult as it may seem also. What is this? Okay. So here we need to understand what role our part plays in getting results. So it is that one extreme is to think that actually I alone determine the results. Because I studied so much, I got this many marks. Because I answered the questions in the interview so well, that's why I got this job. Now, because I'm so good at this particular skill, that's why I got this award in the company. Well, okay, there is some truth in that. But the problem is sometimes we may study very well for an exam, but maybe at that particular time, it's a percentile system and there are other students who are more brilliant than us. It's not that we are not good, but just that sometimes some others may be much better than us at that time. So our part alone doesn't always determine the result. We may offer a competitive bid for a project, but somehow somebody else is able to offer a more competitive bid. And then we don't get the results. So our part, to say that our part determines the results, that is a misreading of reality. But the other extreme is to say, oh, everything is destined. And my destiny is terrible. My destiny is not. Meri kismati phooti hai. Some people say like that. And to say that nothing is in my hands. Well, if nothing is in your hands, then why are you lamenting? When you're lamenting is not in your hands. Stop lamenting. No, I want to lament. At least I have the right to lament. So, what happens is, this idea, this is unrealistic to say nothing is in my hands. Yes, certainly there are some things in our hands. So the idea is we can say our role in determining results is contributive. It is not decisive. We play a part, and how much of a part we play, that can vary from circumstance to circumstance. Sometimes we just play a very significant part, and then we could say that we are instrumental in getting the results. Sometimes we do something, but circumstances work out in such a way that it's it just things work out. So suppose if we consider cricket is a very popular sport in India. So suppose somebody wants to get into the Indian cricket team, and there are so many talented players already in the Indian cricket team that one way is that this person has to perform in a super excellent way again and again and again and again, and then finally maybe there is some other player gets injured, and then this player gets at play. So you could say that your endeavor was 90%, and that chance that other player got injured, you got the chance. But suppose sometimes it happens that, like say, the whole team falls sick because of something, and then you get a opportunity to get an international. international level. I think it happened when India was in Australia a couple of years, was it 1.5 years ago? Almost the entire team was injured. So even those who had gone as practice bowlers, they got to play in the team. And they did well. So what happened was, you may say the endeavor was there, but as compared to the endeavor, the circumstances played a far bigger role over there. So our endeavor does play a role, but it's contributive. And how much of a contribution? That can vary from circumstance to circumstance. But what is in our hands is our part. So we have to do our part well. But acknowledge that our part is not the whole. So when Krishna says, karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, the idea is that our part matters. And that's why we have to do our part well. So that's why it's not irresponsible. Because if we are irresponsible, we will not do our part well. But at the same time, our part alone does not produce the result. And that is why we need detachment. If you don't have detachment, what will happen? I did so much and nothing came about. Life is so terrible. The world is so unfair. God doesn't care for me at all. Is God against me? You can come up with all kinds of things. So both being responsible means doing our part. Being detached means recognizing our part is not the whole. That way, being detached can actually empower us to function more responsibly. Because when we are detached, detachment enables us to focus on what is in our control while letting go of that which is not in our control. So in one sense, if some of you read, Stephen Covey talks about circle of influence or circle of control. So what Krishna is saying, karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So karmanyeva adhikaraste is, just to use that terminology, what is in our circle of influences, that we can do our part. But the results is in our circle of concern, but it's not in our control. So let go of it. So what modern self-help teachers talk about, Krishna may not use the exact same terminology, like be proactive or circle of influence, circle of concern. Those terms may not be used, but Krishna is talking about the same concept. And this concept is actually very empowering for us to function in every area of life. It's not just professionally, it's even in our family relationships. We can't control what our children will become in the future. But we can control what impressions we are giving them. We can control how we are interacting with them. Even in our devotional life, we may want to do many services, but we may not always get the services that we want to do. But okay, this is the opportunity I have right now. Let me do it. Let me do it well. And then who knows, Krishna will give me a bigger opportunity in future. So in one sense, rather than thinking of detachment and responsibility are opposites, rather it is detachment that enables us to be responsible. That to the extent I have certain level of detachment, then I can be responsible for what is in my hands, what is in my control. If I don't have that detachment, then instead of focusing my energy on what is in my control, I'll be obsessing over all that is not in my control. And we won't be able to act responsibly. So Arjuna, he had detachment. Okay, his son was killed. It was horrible. It was heartbreaking. But he was able to accept it and move on. But moving on doesn't mean, this war is such a terrible thing. My son was killed. I'll just give up the war and go away. No, I don't want my son died for a cause, and that cause should not go in vain. I will carry it forward. So detachment, in one sense, can help us to become more responsible if we understand what detachment means. So what does detachment mean? It doesn't mean being indifferent. It doesn't mean not caring in terms of emotions. It doesn't mean not caring in terms of actions. It means caring for what is in our control, caring for doing our part, while accepting that there are things which are which are beyond my part, and accepting however they may work out. So Arjuna was empowered by the teaching of detachment, and similarly we also can be empowered in our lives to do our responsibilities, to play our part with industriousness, with resourcefulness, at the same time without getting emotionally dependent or emotionally locked in particular things. Okay, as long as we have the opportunity, we fully invest ourselves emotionally. But once it is done, our emotions we can withdraw and we can move on to the next thing. And that's how we can function most effectively in all walks of our life. So I'll summarize. I spoke today about the how to be detached without being irresponsible. And started with the verse about renunciation in the mode of goodness. So we talked about some people think that India was not successful because Indians were too detached. But it is not because of detachment, because of misunderstanding of detachment. When detachment started being equated with indifference or irresponsibility, oh, this world doesn't matter, whatever happens in this world doesn't matter. That is not the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. When it was misunderstood like that, the problems came up. So we talked about the modes. The modes are building blocks of reality, and the modes are also ropes that shape our perceiving, processing, and pursuing. How matter and consciousness interact. So Krishna talks about renunciation in the three modes. In the mode of goodness, one is detached from worldly association and worldly attachment, means attachment to the result specifically. In passion, one is actually that renunciation turns into frustration, where anger or annoyance towards the things that are not working out. And in the mode of ignorance, it goes worse towards aversion, hatred toward the things that want to work out. And one starts rationalizing one's irresponsibility as if one is detached. So, why is detachment important for us? How can it help us? Two things. When we seek something and don't get it, to ensure that the craving doesn't consume and destroy us. And when we have something and it's taken away from us, at that time to ensure that the lamenting again doesn't consume and destroy us. So to protect us from disproportionate hankering and lamenting, craving and lamenting, shochati and kangshati, detachment can be helpful. And detachment doesn't mean we don't care for others. It means we don't have to prove ourselves to others. Detachment doesn't mean we don't set goals, but rather we accept whatever results come after we have set our goals. And how can we differentiate in terms of our functioning between goals and results? By understanding that we play a part. So our part we need to play well, and setting goals will inspire us to play our part well. But after we have played our part, we understand that I alone don't determine the results. So therefore, be detached from it. And we talked about the example of how Arjuna responded to Abhimanyu's death. Although it was personally traumatic for him, because he had detachment, he was able to move on. Detachment means that not that he didn't have emotions, but those emotions didn't control his actions. He stuck to his duty. And the last part, I discussed that it is not that detachment and responsibility are opposites. Rather, detachment can help us to become more responsible, because being responsible means focusing on what is in our control. And detachment enables us to turn away from the things that are not in our control to better focus on what is in our control. And in this way, detachment can help us to do our responsibilities more effectively. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. This was such a beautiful class. It touched upon so many things, including like psychology, relationships, and I could see like how we can practice this in many different ways in our day-to-day life. I wish I had this class like few years back. It would have helped. Question for you is, lot of us, many of us, we derive the motivation to do something by locking our emotions into whatever, right? The end result or whatnot.
Yeah.
And
I would use the word investing. See, locking
Investing.
sometimes is basically it's not in our control. That's what we seem to say.
yes,
Investing emotions is required.
yes.
That's not a bad thing.
So how do we keep ourselves motivated at the same time being detached? Because if you are not investing emotions, then there has to be some higher cause of like duty or something like that we need to
Okay,
focus on.
that's an important point. Good you brought it up. So how do we invest our emotions without becoming consumed by it? If I'm investing my emotions, isn't that opposite to detachment? Not exactly. Mm, we could say that there are, let's try to put it this way, that there are some, there's at the bottom, we have our emotions. So let's consider emotions and identity. So investing our emotions in a particular thing is required for us to function properly. But how much do the invested emotions determine our core identity? That is the question. Say, for example, if somebody, say, I give the example, somebody is studying for IAS. Now, if their sole sense of identity has become, I want to be an IAS officer. And if I can't become an IAS officer, I'm a failure. Then that level of investment of emotions, where it becomes our core identity, that is dangerous. So we all have various functional identities in the world, and we would like to have maybe better functional identities. Say maybe I am a team leader right now. I want to become a project manager or whatever the hierarchy is. That's fine. But I also have to understand that I am not defined by that identity. Whether I am a team leader or a project manager or simply a software engineer or I am unemployed, I still have my core identity. I'm a soul, I'm a part of God, and I am always loved by God, valued by God. And along with that, while functioning in the world, I'll have various identities. So we could say there is a fundamental identity, and that is spiritual. And then we have functional identities. These can be many. These can be social, circumstantial, professional. So many identities are there. So when we say we are not the body, we are the soul, that the Gita teaches. What is the practical application of that? The practical application is not just be detached from the body. Well, that's not the point. The practical application is that the bodily identities should not overpower our spiritual identity. That means, see, I may be a mother, I may be a father, I may be a sister, I may be a son, I may be a daughter, I may be in society, I may be a software engineer, I may be a financial consultant, whatever it is. None of these identities should become so strong as to overshadow my spiritual identity. If that level of identification comes up, then what will happen is, if something goes wrong in that area, that will devastate us. But it is another way to talk about this is, we can say that our various identities and the activities we do in those identities are like the tributaries of a river. So if a giant river like Ganga is there, many small channels of water contribute towards it, and then the main body of Ganga flows towards the ocean. So for us, our life's journey flows through many tributaries, many channels. But when we become too fixated on one identity, then the river of our consciousness becomes reduced to that one channel alone. So now things may have changed recently. So one of my friends did an extensive study on suicide. So especially suicide among youth, among students. So it was about 8-10 years ago before it was published. So he said that in India, most suicides happen because students don't do well in their exams. And this was again, I said 2010, 2015. He says in the West, when young people commit suicide, it's primarily because their relationships don't work out. He says, at least among Caucasians, they are not so invested. Okay, you didn't do well in the exam, what's the big deal? But in India, you didn't do well in the exam, what's remaining in your life now? It becomes like that. So yeah, exams are important, but life is much bigger than any exam. Now, if you look back at it, all of you, the Americans, you have been successful in many exams. But still, it's not that one exam is worth losing one's life. We see that in perspective today. But at that time, what happens is the whole river of one's consciousness gets reduced to one channel. So that is what we want to avoid. Now, in some cases, it's relatively easier. Okay, you didn't do well in the exam, what's the big deal? In some cases, we may have invested lots of years in something, lots of endeavors in something, and if it doesn't work out, then what do we do? Okay, still, this is one channel, it's not, it is getting blocked. Fine, what are the other channels in which I can keep moving forward? So we shouldn't, so investing our emotions is fine. It's not only fine, it's necessary. But locking our emotions means the emotions have, that our identity becomes reduced to that one thing. And then there's nothing else we can do. Even in bhakti, if somebody defines themselves as a singer, no, our defining identity, we are all servants of Krishna. As a servant of Krishna, we may sing, we may speak, we may distribute books. If tomorrow something changes, say somebody is a singer and they lose their throat, what are they going to do? They're still devotees, but if they've identified themselves more as a singer than as a sevak, then they will not be able to do anything. So we have to make sure that our functional identities don't overshadow our fundamental identity. That's why sarvopadi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. The definition of bhakti is there are many upadhis which will come in our lives and we can't avoid them because that's the way we function in the world. Hmm? Even bhakti will get upadhis. Oh, you're such a good cook. You're such a good this. You're such a good that. And that's wonderful if we have some abilities with which we can do valuable services. That's wonderful. But though we cannot let them become our sole identity. Does that answer the question? Thank you. Yes, Ru.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Uh, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for the very systematic and deliberate class, Prabhu. My question is, when it comes to spiritual attachment, when we are attached to our services or our spiritual identity is obviously that we're the spirit soul, but beyond that, we might be attached to particular services. Does the same logic that is applied to our material activities apply to our spiritual activities? Because in different circumstances, our life might take different shapes and it might appear that our capacity to serve is reduced. But the attachment to those services, if it is misplaced or misunderstood, can tend to hold us back in moving forward. So when it comes to
Yes.
spiritual attachments, how do we apply detachment in such a way that we don't lose our desire to serve, but we don't lose hope altogether?
Good question. Thank you. So somehow I am not too comfortable with the words material and spiritual. Why? Because it's like somebody in America says, you are an Asian. Asia is such a big place, And Asia, Indians have one culture, Chinese have another culture, the Arabians have another culture, the Filipinos have another culture. So Asia is very big. Of course, you may say in America, most Chinese and Indians are there. So, but still they have different culture. And once you come to know India, South Indians and North Indians also have such a different culture. So the point is, when we talk about material also, in material there is sattva, rajas and tamas. And those three are very different. So, and how are we defining, so rather than talking about material and spiritual as a category, because we all have particular conceptions of what defines something as material, what sometimes defines something as spiritual. So I may say, it's spiritual because I'm attached to distributing books, distributing my service. Okay, but we might be doing book distribution in a way that is quite rajasic. That means when I'm distributing books, my joy is not, oh, this person got the book. My joy is, my score is more than that devotee score. It may be. I mean, it's not a bad thing. Somehow or the other, we are serving Krishna. So it just because I'm doing a service to Krishna, can I really call that as a spiritual attachment? Partly, yes, definitely. But it's not entirely. My consciousness may still be in goodness, passion, ignorance. So for the timing, let's put that categorization aside and let's look at the principle. See, the principle is that every service is a blessing from Krishna. And if we have the opportunity and the ability to do a service, and we should cherish it, both the opportunity and the ability. If we have that, that's one of the greatest blessings that we can have, and we do the service as well as we can. At the same time, it may happen that the service we are able to do today, we may not be able to do tomorrow. Things may change. Maybe our situations change, maybe our abilities change, whatever happens. So, through our services, one result is that we just become more competent in the service. We do more service, we gain some appreciation, recognition in the community of devotees. And that is one aspect which is important. We are making some tangible contribution in Krishna's mission. That is good. But another equally important, if not more important aspect of service is, so you can say service, from there two arrows come. One is the contribution we are making through the service. The other is the connection with Krishna that we are establishing through the service. That is also equally, if not more important. So if it's only one thing that is happening, if only my service I'm making so much contribution, but what if tomorrow I can't make that contribution? Then what is left for me? Now, through my service, I should also be connecting with Krishna. And then, even if I don't have that service, that means I may not have that contribution, but I will still have that connection. So, we have to, in that sense, recognize that both effects should be coming. Now, this does not mean that we can only we only have connection and no contribution. It doesn't mean that. We want to contribute, no doubt. We are a mission in this world, and mission in this world means that we want to have tangible effects through the services that we are doing. But if you look at Prabhupada's own example, Prabhupada was extraordinarily successful in the last 10 years of his life in terms of how many temples he opened and how many devotees he inspired. But even if we consider, even in those 10 years, there were many projects that didn't work out. So, for example, Prabhupada wanted to start Gurukuls, and that project never really took off during his times. Prabhupada wanted to complete the Bhagavatam. He tried, but he couldn't complete it in his time. There are some things which are not successful from a material perspective. Now we can say Prabhupada's success was that he inspired within others the desire to carry on the legacy, and they completed it. That is true, no doubt. But at the same time, Prabhupada personally was not able to complete it. But he was not agitated by that. Toward the end of his life, when he was asked, do you have any last desires remaining? Prabhupada said, kuch ichha nahi. Prabhupada could have said, I just want to live for some more time and I will complete the Bhagavatam. That will be my life's magnum opus. Prabhupada was in the 10th canto. 10th canto is the heart of the Bhagavatam, and he could have completed that, and he could have done 11th and 12th cantos. Prabhupada didn't. Prabhupada was doing Bhagavatam commentary till the end of his life. But it was not that there was any overwhelming sense of dissatisfaction. Oh, I am not able to complete this. It was not there. So we need to recognize that our service, so Prabhupada was connected with Krishna, and service is the mean to connect us with Krishna. And yes, we want to do contribution also. So that's why, rather than just simply categorizing as spiritual or material attachments, rather than when we are doing a service, we have to see whether both of these are happening. Are we able to make some tangible contribution in Krishna's service? Is our connection to Krishna also increasing through our service? That means if we are going out and distributing books, then after the marathon gets over, and say we go to the temple and we go in front of the deities, now do we feel our heart swelling and we feel, Krishna, I was able to do this service, I'm so grateful, and we feel more connected. It is Krishna's message we are going to give. I think, why go to the temple and waste time, and what's there to go in front of the deities? I'll just go and distribute more books. That's nice, but ultimately, what are we distributing books for? To connect people with Krishna and to connect ourselves with Krishna. So, that connection with Krishna should also be increasing. Dharma svanishta pumsam vishwaksena katha suyah na utpadayedati ratim shramayvahi kevalam. That means that if our eagerness to hear about Krishna, now eagerness to hear about Krishna doesn't necessarily mean that every devotee will necessarily have to test their advancement by how eager they are for classes. No, we all have different levels of eagerness. but just the eagerness to know more about Krishna, eagerness to remember Krishna, eagerness to connect with Krishna has to increase. So that is also aspect we should consider. So if it's only contribution, not connection, then that may not be sustainable when circumstances change. But if both are happening, of course, we can say in our youth, when there is more rajas in our body, we may focus more on contribution than on connection. And as we grow older, we focus more on connection than on contribution. As we grow older, we may feel, okay, even if I don't travel, I don't do so many services, I want to spend more time in Dham, I want to hear more, I want to chant more. It's also fine. According to phases in our life, things may change, but both need to be moving forward. Does it answer your question?
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Yes, it does.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes. Welcome to you.
Just to Prabhuji add to Praveen Prabhu's question, basically, and I got the part of the answer basically, but to the functional identity, sometimes as you were mentioning, right, like, okay, some things don't work out, okay, you try channelize your energy in other things, right? But I think where I struggle personally is disinvesting from that thing that you invested in a lot, right? That takes a lot of time, and also there's a lot of emotional churn. That's like first part. Like question is basically, how do you, is it like a bad thing that it takes a lot of time to get through that, and okay, reinvest your energy in other things?
It's not easy. If that's what we are asking. That if say we have invested something and it doesn't work out, it's actually going to take time. If you look at the same example of Abhimanyu's death, there's the entire chapter which describes Arjuna's lamentation in the Mahabharata, and we could say that is in the middle of the war, and still he is lamenting. And after the Kurukshetra war, also it is described that all the Pandavas grieved for their lost ones. So there's a difference between grieving and lamenting. Grieving is essential for healing, for growing through that, accepting that, okay. So it's like if there is an emotional wound. If suppose I have a physical fracture, I have to acknowledge that my hand is fractured. Maybe I can't lift weights right now. I can't even do normal activity. So I have to slow down. I have to keep my hand in the sling for some time, and then slowly resume activities. So same with emotional wounds also. So grieving is the process where we heal ourselves. And we may require that if we have emotionally invested in something very strongly. That's natural. But if we consider the two phases, first is that if my hand is fractured, first I have to put my hand in a sling for maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on whatever the nature of the injury is. But then after that, I have to start moving my hand. So same way with respect to emotional wounds, there may be a time of withdrawal, there may be a time of grieving, and generally the Shraddha and other rituals that were performed, they were in one sense meant for people to grieve. So that grieving is not the same as lamenting. Mahabharata describes after Dashrath was killed, there was a 10-day period of statewide mourning for the loss of the king. That's all part of grieving. But after that, gradually, you start moving, start doing one's normal activities. It's not easy, but one has to start that. So now, just like with respect to physical wounds, at least you can have okay, the fracture is this much, you will need to rest this much. Now, with respect to emotional wounds, because things are subtler, it may not be that clear how much time somebody may need for grieving. So different people may need different amounts of time, and it is painful, no doubt about it. So we cannot avoid it being painful, but we can ensure that it is purposeful. That is, through that I move forward and I move through the next stage in healing. Okay.
And just the other part of the functional identity, sometimes it happens that okay, we understand, okay, we are part and parcel of Krishna, our main goal is devotional service, but there is a lot of expectations that either, I tend to do this like mental comparison. Oh, my friends are in this stage of their lives, right, and I'm not here, right? Like, or sometimes relatives expect some things from you, and sometimes even if you have not invested emotions in certain things, because people are expecting things from you, at the end of the day it causes again emotional churn there.
That's true. Hey, some people say never compare. Well, it's just not practical. Now, we live in a society where comparison is unavoidable. So, my understanding is that comparison can also be in Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna. So, if the comparison is Tamoguna, as soon as somebody is better than me, oh, I'm worthless. Whatever I do is never going to be of any use. Why do anything at all? So, we take the comparison in a way that is emotionally and sometimes even practically destructive or damaging for us, if not destructive. That's where people succumb to depression or inferiority complex. Sometimes even become suicidal also. So that's comparison in Tamoguna. The comparison in Rajoguna would be more where we see somebody is better than me, then we just find I have to become better than that person. And then at that time, generally speaking, we have dharma, artha, kama, and then ultimately moksha. So when the pursuit of artha and kama becomes at the expense of dharma, not on the foundation of dharma, that is when it becomes rajasic in a negative way. So if I see somebody is having a bigger house than me, then it's okay. Let me also work hard and get a bigger house. That's one thing. But then I take up some job which I don't like, but just because it is giving me a lot of money and it's not even compatible with me, it drains me physically, it drains me emotionally. Just usko dikhana hai mujhe. I want to show this person. Hell, what do you show? You get a bigger house, but you just are miserable in that house. So what is the use of that? So if that comparison makes us want to, like you could say, defeat the other person at all costs. At all costs means at the cost of here dharma. You seek artha and kama at the cost of dharma, then that is rajasic in a way that will degenerate toward tamasic. And sattva-guna is okay. This person has done something better than me. Now, what is the way I can improve myself? So we often can get inspiration from others' excellence to strive for excellence ourselves. But in Sattva-guna, Sattvat Sanjayate Jnanam, Krishna says. In Sattva-guna, when we say we have knowledge, what it means is that we can understand what should be the parameters for excellence for myself or parameters for success for myself. So does my parameter for success have to be exactly the same thing? I have to get a bigger house than this person, or I have to get a bigger car than this? Maybe or maybe not. Maybe I am in a different field, and yes, I also want to improve. So that way, if we do it, then we can actually feel inspired. Like Prabhupada would say that he would say that when other devotees distribute more books, like one temple would distribute more books, Prabhupada would say that those temples distribute so many books, you also distribute so many books now. What he wanted was that you also do more service. So that is constructive kind of competition. So comparison we can't avoid. But then if we have either some sattva-guna ourselves, or we have somebody in sattva-guna who can guide us, or at least somebody with whom we can talk, then whether the comparison is having a rajasic tamasic effect, or how can we process it in such a way that can be sattvic, that is something which we can do. Then we can move forward, because we cannot live, as you rightly said, that we cannot live socially isolated. So people will have influence on us, people will speak, and their speak will have influence on us, but how it influences us, that is somewhere we can have some level of monitoring of that. Okay, last question. Let's stop. Any other Matajis have questions? Okay, last question.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for such wonderful class. The title itself is so intriguing, got attracted. And then you gave all the necessary points in this subject. It's very thorough. Thank you so much. I have a question more on the Mahabharata example that you gave. That Arjuna, such a great warrior, had to fight with this Trigarta warrior, Shusharma. So when I was reading Krishna Dharma's Prabhu's commentary, like why did it take Arjuna to 3 days to kill him in the first place? We haven't heard like great things about him. And of course, another takeaway could be that, we have to have these lessons that Abhimanyu had to be killed, but just wanted to understand like more. Is there any more references in that section?
Yeah, okay, so why did it take Arjuna 3 days to overcome the Trigarthas? See, generally, the Kshatriya codes, they're a little difficult for us to understand now. And I won't say that I have a like very clear understanding of those codes. But broadly, it was that a warrior was not meant to use celestial weapons against an opponent who does not have celestial weapons. Mhm. So, the Trigarthas had a huge army, hmm, but they didn't have celestial weapons. That's why when Arjuna fought, he fought without any celestial weapons. So he just, in one sense, arrow after arrow after arrow after arrow, shooting with untiring precision, he overcame them. And that's why it took a lot of time. Now, now is it that so where I will tell where I'm not clear, and then I'll tell you how I understand it. Is it that the other person has to use a celestial weapon before Arjuna can use a celestial weapon? It's not literally like that. See, the idea is that that it has to be it's a fair fight. It's a fight of skills. It's a fight of strength. It has to be basically a fair fight. Mm. So, what does a fair fight mean? That means that um, mm, that can vary in time, place, circumstances. The fairness, it cannot be reduced down to rules alone. Mm. There are certainly, of course, certain rules, but you cannot reduce everything down to rules in terms of fairness. There's also spirit, like in cricket, you have the rules of the game and then the spirit of the game. Somebody may follow the rules of the game, but they may violate the spirit of the game at times. So Arjuna there, because he did not use celestial weapons, that's why it took him a lot of time. But eventually, when he wisened up to their strategy, so on the second day when when Yudhishthir was about to be arrested, and Arjuna realized that Arjuna could hear Drona's conch and other things on the other side of the war battlefield. He was about to turn, and when he was about to turn and leave, at that time, several Trigartha warriors, they simultaneously didn't just challenge him, but they attacked him. So when that happened, Arjuna got angry, and then he used a celestial weapon and he just created like a cloud of arrows, and just that blinded the Trigarthas. And Krishna appreciated him. Well done. He said, now let's rush to Yudhishthir. So the idea is that if the other side is not really fighting fair, then you can use celestial weapons also. So, but generally, celestial weapons are not used to be used against ordinary warriors, or certainly not against ordinary soldiers. So that's why it took him a lot of time to overcome them. Okay. Thank you. So thank you very much. You have a question? We'll stop with this.
Prabhuji, from the verse, right, the mode of goodness seems to be the prerequisite to not to get locked in the emotions, to have proper proper attitude towards our actions. So generally, when we perform devotional activities in the morning, we have some goodness, but that doesn't sustain throughout the day. When we start working, right, we end up in passion, and then eventually we get into locked in certain things. Any suggestions on that, Prabhu?
Yeah, okay. So how can we sustain goodness throughout the day? And goodness is required for us to balance. Well, first of all three modes are a part of material nature, and all three nodes play their role. Say, for example, you consider tamoguna. And if somebody says sleep isn't the mode of ignorance, okay, that's one way of looking at it. But if sleep were just tamoguna, then why is it that after sleeping you feel sattvic? Isn't it? If we sleep properly, adequately, we feel fresh after that. And freshness is a characteristic of the mode of goodness. So if sleep were solely tamoguna, how could tamoguna produce sattva guna? So it's not that simple. Sleep itself is not necessarily in tamoguna. Sleep is just a biological function. You could say it's more our relationship with sleep that determines whether it's sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. What do I mean relationship with sleep? Am I sleeping so that I can rest my body? Or am I sleeping so that I can just, run away from the world, pull a blanket and forget everything? Just escape from the world. So, sleeping can be, in that sense, it will be tamasic when it is excessive, when it is escapist, but it's a biological function. And with that attitude, we prayerfully take sleep and wake up, and that's not necessarily tamasic. Or even if tamas influences, we can shake off that influence very easily. In fact, not sleeping will cause more tamas otherwise. It's like what happens if you don't sleep adequately, then it's not that automatically you go to sattva. We may be awake, but we will be half asleep. And that's tamasic in one sense. So, there are certain activities in life which can be best done with a certain amount of rajoguna. Sometimes if I have 15 things to do quickly, one after another. So is it necessary that I have to be very sedate and one by one? No, let's complete this fast. Nothing wrong in that. So it's more that we need periodic connection in Sattva-guna to reorient ourselves. To try to be in Sattva-guna all the time, it may be possible for some people, but some people it may not be. But as long as that lower mode is not taking control of our life, if that mode becomes prominent in particular phases of our life, that is okay. It is not that when Arjuna was fighting in the Kurukshetra war, especially say when he was racing to get to Jayadratha before sunset, was he in Sattva-guna at that time? Well, we could say his consciousness was pure Sattva, because he was doing it all for Krishna. When he's functioning, okay, this warrior is here, let's shoot here. It was urgent. So my understanding would be that focus more on our purpose of what we are trying to do. And then if a particular mode is best suited for fulfilling that purpose, then that is okay. So if a Kshatriya has to do Kshatriya work, some amount of Rajoguna is required for doing Kshatriya work. It's difficult if you have to go Ishwar Bhav, it is said. One of the characteristics of Kshatriya, okay, do this, let's get all this done together. So they have to push a little bit, that's okay. So rather than worrying about how to stay in Sattva-guna throughout, try to make the foundation of Sattva-guna stronger. Say in the morning, maybe read or chant or whatever. Do it in such a way that you keep the Sattva-guna strong in foundation. And other things can be done as appropriate. And we'll ourselves learn over a period of time how best we can function. So maybe this much level of Rajoguna is good for me. Like some devotees, they say, do only one thing at a time. Well, okay, that's nice. But is that an absolute principle? Not necessarily. Sometimes the only way we can function is do 2-3 things at a time. Say we are driving, we're talking on phone, we are hearing a lecture, we are doing our laundry, we may be doing something else at the same time. That's fine. We have to individually find out how we can function. So is it that doing one thing is sattvic, and if you're doing 2-3 things that is rajasic? That's oversimplification of sattva-guna and rajoguna. It's more in terms of purpose. If somebody is able to do 2-3 things well, and some people just have a capacity to do a lot of things. And if they're not doing 3-4 things, then they feel as if I'm doing nothing. So then they won't come to sattva-guna, actually they will go to tamoguna. Because they will not be able to function. So let's look at introspect ourselves and see how I can function most effectively. Okay.
So Prabhuji,
Let's talk one to one. Yes, Swami.
I had a question on the Kriya Visual.
Okay.
You mentioned about how we can have, after every service. The question I was having is like after you mentioned how we should have deeper connection with Krishna. So some services, sometimes we are conscious, but sometimes we, are unconscious, or, how to make sure that actually whatever we are doing is we are actually increasing our connection with Krishna.
Yeah, I think it's when we are doing a service, we have to be focused on the service itself. It's very difficult at that time to, we don't, bhakti is not like being a schizophrenic. One part I'm doing my service, one part I'm remembering something else. No, we immerse ourselves in the service to Krishna at that time. That is fine. But over a period of time, if we, okay, let's put it this way, that if we understand that our purpose is to develop a relationship with Krishna, like otherwise, see what happens in bhakti, it is a feature of bhakti to exalt and absolutize every limb of bhakti. Say, for example, when we talk about the holy name, there is nothing apart from the holy name in the 14 worlds. And when we go to dham like Mayapur, all other dhams, all other activities are pale. This is the Audarya dham. This is the best thing in the world. Or if we say that, when we read Prabhupada's books are the basis of, they are filled with his compassion. They are what will deliver us. So when we glorify one limb of bhakti, often that is what is glorified as the most important. Or the most important thing in spiritual life is to please your authorities. Please your spiritual master. Yasya prasadat bhagavad prasado. Well, yes, all these are important. But all these are to help us develop our relationship with Krishna. If Prabhupada was asked what pleases you the most, he didn't say book discipline. He said, when you love Krishna, that pleases me the most. So if we keep that in mind, then we can do the services wholeheartedly, but still we'll be able to, okay, my purpose is to develop a relationship with Krishna. Now, then we will find out time. For us, from an experiential perspective, certain things may make us feel connected with Krishna. For some devotees, it may be, they go in front of the deities and personally offer some prayers to Krishna. For some people, it might be just sing some Vaishnava songs. Some people, it might be just hear some 10th canto pastimes. So we find out what activities nourish us in terms of our relationship with Krishna. And we may sometimes need to make more time for those activities. But it is not that necessarily we will feel that connection with Krishna equally through all activities. Sometimes we may be competent in a particular service. Say, if somebody is very competent in book distribution. Now, does that necessarily mean that through book distribution they'll feel very connected with Krishna? No, maybe they feel more connected with Krishna when they go in front of the temple and pray before the deities, or they participate in dance in the kirtan. But does that mean that then book distribution is no use? No. As I said, the connection contribution percentage in different service may vary for all of us. And in some services, the contribution may be 90% and the connection may be feel only 10%. In some other services, the connection may be 90% and the contribution may be 10% only. Like one of my devotee friends, he spends a lot of time writing his journals. And then one of his guides was asking him, okay, are you going to write some BTG articles for the journal? He said, no, this is for me. So many hours you're spending. What are you getting out of this? At least write some articles which you can publish. He says, no, those will be separate writings for me. So that was what he was doing for feeling connected with Krishna. Or somebody may sit in front of the deities and just do some bhajans. He said, are you memorizing the bhajan? Don't you know it already? Well, I'm not singing it to memorize it. I'm singing it to relish it. Isn't it? So, we can't always see all services only from the contribution perspective. So each of us, if we find that certain services connect us with Krishna, then we make some time for it. But it is not necessary that through all our services, we have to feel that connection with Krishna. That may not happen sometimes for us. Okay. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Thank you.
Caitanya Caran Prabhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yeah. 10 minutes, devotees can come from outside, wait for 10 minutes, we'll serve prasadam arrange.
Hare Krishna. I think most of you may have seen these two new books which I have written. One is Relishing Bhagavad Gita. This analyzes the Bhagavad Gita from the perspective of the Krishna-Arjuna relationship. Like I talked of today about 13.9, this Anavishwangaputra Daragrahadishu, and connected that with the story from the Mahabharata. So in this book, about 100 articles in the Gita are there, and they talk about those Gita verses in relationship with the Krishna-Arjuna relationship, and many Mahabharata stories are there connected over there. This is Bhagavad Gita Insights, which talks more in terms of the Gita's concept. So what when like today what I talked about, detached but not irresponsible. There's an article on that topic. Then when Krishna says everything, that this world is filled with Maya, does that mean everything is an illusion? If Krishna is in control, does he mean he controls everything, or do we have free will? So these questions which may come from when we approach the Gita from a rational perspective. So again, this also has 100 articles, and many of the figures that you might have seen, pendulums and boxes. So like that, there are 80 illustrations in each of these books which illustrate the Gita concepts. So you may find these two books helpful, and there are several other books are also available. The table which is behind here. Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.